what causes it, and how do you reverse it. And so we'll get started. This is the title that got you guys here, but this is a story from Pills to Plants, but really more so it's a story of shame to love. And it starts at the beginning. So this is my family. I am a 7th generation Texan and a Jew, so I grew up eating burgers and barbecue and bagels and blintzes. Something I call the standard American diet, wearing cowboy boots with some chutzpah. And I had a great childhood. I really did. My friends and I, we rode our bikes to and from school. My mom inspired my imagination and my love for make-believe and taught me to dream. And my dad taught me how to play baseball and basketball and football and made time for us every single day to be outdoors, playing catch with us and with all of our friends. And I really had a wonderful childhood. This is my twin brother, Bobby. That's my little sister, Jewel. Obviously my mom and Borat before he was famous. But there were a few things that profoundly affected me growing up. And one of them you could say was my relationship with food, but really it was more my relationship with myself. With all the best intentions in the world, I was criticized quite a lot for wanting to eat bad food. And over the course of time, I began to believe that there had to be something broken in me. There had to be something wrong with me, because for whatever reason, I could not resist choosing what everyone else so easily avoided, and what my parents so desperately criticized me for wanting. And so I so desperately needed their acceptance that I thought if I can't stop making these decisions, I better hide them from the world. And I was about 10 years old when I started taking food from the kitchen and running into my bedroom, turning off the lights, closing the door, sitting in the corner alone in the dark, and eating. I was doing this because I was ashamed and I was afraid. I was so afraid that at any moment that door was going to open, the light was going to come on, and my parents were going to see me for what I really was. A broken child who was not worthy of their acceptance or their love, and that terrified me. Because I wanted and I needed their love and acceptance so desperately. And at about the same time, I was taken to a doctor who diagnosed me with attention deficit disorder. I was born in 1982. This was the generation of ADHD. And so now I had a doctor in a white coat who my parents looked up to, saying to me, Adam, these aren't the exact words, but this is what I heard as a 10-year-old. There's something else about you that doesn't work. There's something else about you that's broken. There's something else about you that the rest of the world doesn't agree with. But thankfully, we have a pill. As long as you take a pill, no one's ever going to know. And from that point on, when I saw something about myself that I didn't like, or that others didn't like, or that the world didn't seem to agree with, all I had to do was find a substance outside of myself to fix it. Hide what I believed was broken about me so that I could be the person everyone else needed me to be. We moved to Austin, Texas from Houston right before I started high school. I didn't have a lot of friends. I was a little late to start puberty. I was kind of an awkward freshman, if there's anything other than that. I had a few friends, and at that time, my prescription from Ritalin had been changed to Adderall. And for those of you who don't know what Adderall is, it is a stimulant medication that is used to treat ADHD. It's also used to treat narcolepsy. But really what it is medically pure amphetamine. That's what the stuff is. If you were to get a generic bottle of Adderall, the prescription bottle would say amphetamine salts, because that's what the stuff is. And I got a call from my friend saying, hey man, are you coming to the party this weekend? I don't know, I don't really know anyone there. Oh dude, you gotta come and bring your Adderall with you. Like, what? Bring my Adderall with me? No, just bring it with you, trust me. Like if you take a lot of it, it's a bunch of fun. You can stay up all night, you have loads of energy, just bring it. Of course I brought it with me. I wanted to be the person that everyone wanted to be around. I wanted to be that person that had something that everyone else valued. I wanted to be somebody that meant something to someone else. And I'm going to tell you guys, the second that I used Adderall as a recreational drug, I was hooked. Not to the drugs, but to what it did for me. It made me the person I always thought everyone else needed me to be. Look, I was kind of a shy freshman. I was kind of a shy kid. I didn't have a lot of friends. But man, when I'm on Adderall, I have just this unbelievable amount of confidence. I could talk to anybody, and anything that they're talking about was immediately interesting to me. So I was able to make friends, and I could party at 110% all night long. So I was the life of the party. People liked having me around. I had a little bit of extra weight as a freshman, and guess what? When I'm on Adderall, I don't want to eat. Problem solved. I was struggling with my relationship with my dad because of my work ethic or lack thereof. But man, if I take extra Adderall, I can study about anything for as long as I need to. So it was making my relationship with my dad better. It was making my relationship in school better. It was making me feel good about myself for the first time. This magic pill was magically fixing my entire life. And if some was good, more must be better. It must make me more of that person that I've always needed to be. And it worked. This stuff worked in high school, man. I had friends. I had girlfriends. I lost the weight. My relationship with my dad was amazing. I got a scholarship to the college that I wanted to go to. And this was great. My solution, finally, I found it. But in college, things started to take a turn because I started to need more. And then more became not enough. And not enough became an overwhelming concern in my life. How much do I have left? How long will it last? Where will I get more? How much will that cost? Where will I get the money to get that, to buy those drugs? These were the most overwhelming and constantly reoccurring concerns of my life. And what became less and less important to me was my family, my friends, my schoolwork, my passions, and myself. I so desperately needed something to allow me to escape a life that was too painful a place to be and too painful of a place to show up and be as my authentic self. And so as a sophomore in college, I dropped out. And I told my parents I was coming back to Austin because I got a job in the industry that I was studying, which is true, I did. I got a job, but it was really, I wanted to come back to Austin because I knew the dealers and I knew the doctors that I could scam. So when I came back to Austin, I started doctor shopping. This is where you have multiple doctors prescribing you the same medication without them knowing about each other. This is a felony. I was forging prescriptions. This is another felony. I was buying, dealing drugs on the street. I would scam people. I would steal from anybody. I would do anything to you to get what I needed from you so that I could get more drugs. I was consistently treating my family like garbage. I started to isolate and I started to develop a dependency to fast food. Now, there's a quote that says, "Nothing records the effects of a sad life so graphically as the human body." And this was me at about, I think I was a little over 300 pounds in this photo. And when I say I had an issue with fast food, let me explain to you what I mean by that. I would get up in the morning and I would go to Torchy's Tacos and I would get 4 of their breakfast tacos, potato, egg, and cheese. Then I'd go to McDonald's, get 2 supersized double quarter pounder meals because 1 is clearly not enough. Then I would go to Whataburger and get their extra large honey barbecue chicken strip sandwich meal. For dinner, I'd order an extra large pizza from Papa John's with beef on top, side of the chicken strips with a honey mustard dipping sauce. Then at about 3 in the morning, I would go back to Whataburger for their breakfast on a bun sandwiches with sausage. During the course of the day, I drink about 15 sodas. When I say that I was struggling with substance abuse, the average prescription for Adderall is around 10 milligrams a day. For the last 5 to 10 years of my substance abuse issues, I was doing 450 milligrams in a 24-hour period. I would do this for 6 days straight. I wouldn't sleep. By day 4 or day 5, I'd end up in the throes of a drug-induced psychosis where I'd be hallucinating. I'd be hearing things that weren't really happening. I would develop these really overwhelming obsessive-compulsive tics, one of which was I couldn't stand to feel the hair touch my ears. And I can remember one night, I was brushing my hair forward and back, just trying to get the hair off of my ear for so long and for so hard that by the time morning came and I went to the bathroom, all the hair had been brushed completely off the side of my head. And it was at this miserable time in my life that one of the people who I consistently treated like garbage, and let me tell you, the only time I would interact with my parents was to either blame them or shame them for every single thing that was wrong in my life or to get money or things from them. I didn't care about what was going on in their life. It was, what can I take from you? How can I use you? But no matter what, my parents were always there for me. My dad came to me and said, Adam, Whole Foods Market, my dad has been involved with Whole Foods Market since the very beginning. He said, Whole Foods Market has just partnered with this crazy plant-eating guy named Rip Esselstyn. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. And we started offering these 7-day immersion retreats where you can go and learn how to adopt a plant-based diet in order to make yourself healthy, reverse disease, all these things. And I really want you to go. It's available only to team members, but I think there's a few open spots, and if you want to go, I'll get you in. Guys, I didn't want to go to this. I didn't care what my dad wanted for me. I didn't know who Rip Esselstyn was, and I sure shit didn't care what he had to say. The only reason I went was because I knew if I did, I could get more money from my dad. That is the only reason I said yes. I was high when I went. I brought drugs with me. I used drugs every single day. And in fact, my appearance was so disruptive to the other participants and to Rip Esselstyn that they were having meetings consistently to determine whether or not they were going to kick me out of the program. Thankfully, Rip Esselstyn, being the person that he is, only wanting to see the good in people and the value of what he's offering other people, I wasn't asked to leave. I went to every single lecture. I listened to everything that was being said, and it all made sense. I learned how if I adopt this way of eating, I can reverse disease, I can own my health and well-being. It spoke to a core value in me. I grew up connected to nature thanks to my grandmother. And I learned that if I not only ate a plant-based diet, I could take charge of my health, but I could also be kind to non-human animals on this planet. And in fact, the last night there was a speaker there named Dick Beardsley. And Dick Beardsley is one of the greatest marathoners of all time. He ran a very famous marathon, the Chicago Marathon in the 1980s against a racer named Alberto Salazar, where they finished first and second. They both broke world records. And he didn't talk about his marathon racing. He talked about what happened after. He was working on his family farm. He got caught up in machinery and nearly died. And he ended up dependent upon painkillers. And that dependency became quite an overwhelming experience in his life. And I listened to him talk about himself, talk about the way that he treated people, talk about the way that he moved through the world. I sat there listening to this guy. I was like, man, you know what? If there's ever going to be somebody that I know I can walk up to and say, I have a problem with substances and I have a problem with food and I'm scared and know that they won't judge me for it, it's this guy. Let this be the moment that I finally walk up to somebody and ask for help. And he was signing copies of his books after his speech, and I'm like 10 feet away from the guy, and I just want to walk up to him, and I was a little nervous because there were so many people wanting to talk to him, so I waited till afterwards, and I see him standing there, and my feet are glued to the floor. Like, I could not get myself to take another step closer. And then I said, all right, fine, just say hello to him. Just have a superficial conversation about nothing. Maybe you'll work up the courage to say, can I talk to you in private? And I didn't. I was too afraid. I wasn't desperate enough to give up what was allowing me to escape a life that was so painful a place to be. I wish I could tell you that I went to the immersion, I listened to everything that was being said, and that was it. It changed my life. But that's just not my story. But about 2 years later, sitting in my apartment, I was living like a hoarder. My windows were boarded up because I didn't want people seeing in, and I didn't want to see what was going on outside in the world. And I would have to go to this place called Casual Male XL to shop for clothes because I had to buy pants with a 50-inch waist. And I would come home, and while I was out, I would notice people staring at me. And it's quite a painful experience to have people pay attention to you and ignore you at the same time. And I would imagine them thinking these really horrible things about me, saying these really horrible things about me. And I'd come home and I'd go to my bathroom, I'd take off my shirt, and I'd stand in front of the mirror. And I'd say to myself every horrible, awful thing that I thought people were saying about me. And as they said those things, I just started beating myself as hard as I could, over and over and over again. I was just convinced that if I could just hate myself enough, if I could hate my life enough, maybe then I would be willing and wanting to change my life. I'm going to tell you guys, it doesn't matter how much I hated myself, how much I hated my life, it was never enough to make me want to do better. I could not hate myself back to life. The only thing that would happen was I would end up on the floor, swollen red, crying, because it didn't matter how hard I hit or how hard I hated. I was not going to change. I called my twin brother. I said, Bobby, I don't know what's going on with me, but I'm going to make a promise to you that no matter how bad things get, I'm never going to commit suicide because you're the most important person in my life, and I don't want to live my life without you, and I wouldn't want you to live your life without me. But on August 21st of 2012, in this apartment, I'm 30 years old at the time, I'd already developed erectile dysfunction. I say to myself, you know what? Nothing's ever going to get any better. You might as well spare yourself and everyone that you care about the misery that you're causing. And I attempted suicide by overdose. I can remember feeling this pain on my right side. I tried to stand up, my entire right side cramped. And I want to tell you guys the feeling that you're dying. And I'm not talking about the physical feeling. I'm talking about the feeling
that the last moments of my life were going to be spent alone, disconnected from everything that ever meant anything to me, in a pile of fast food garbage, surrounded by empty pill bottles, was terrifying. I blacked out. I woke up a few hours later in a puddle of vomit. And I had a very clear realization that if I wasn't willing to radically change everything about the way that I moved through the world, my family was going to have to spend the rest of their lives asking themselves why I needed to eat and drug myself to death. And I decided I'm not going to let that happen. I picked up the phone and I called my parents and I asked for help. Without question or judgment, all they did was say, Adam, that's all your mother and I want to do for you. Will you please come home? And 2 weeks later, they helped me check into rehab. Now, when you check yourself into rehab, even when you check yourself in, it's quite an uncomfortable experience. I was strip searched. I had my belongings searched. You're subjected to biomedical testing. You're subjected to psychological evaluations. It's kind of a dehumanizing experience. And as a person who hated himself physically and emotionally, the experience of having to stand naked in a room surrounded by nurses as they checked my body for everything that was wrong with me was one of the most humiliating experiences of my life, but there's a reason for it. One, they want to make sure that you're not trying to bring anything in with you that you're not supposed to. I was high when I checked into rehab. I would not have been able to walk through those doors. I wouldn't have been able to leave my parents' arms and walk down that hall to the detox center if I wasn't high. Just didn't have it in me. They want to make sure that since I was a person who was struggling with substance abuse, I lived a high-risk lifestyle. Do I have anything medically going on with me that I'm not aware of? They also want to have an understanding, what's my baseline psychological situation? How am I thinking? How am I feeling? What's going on with me? And at the 72-hour mark, I got a note from the doctor saying that I needed to come and talk to him. And here I am walking in all arrogant and whatnot, like there couldn't be anything wrong with me, right? Sit down, and that day I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, erectile dysfunction, bipolar disorder, suicidal depression, anxiety disorder, sleep disorder, and attention deficit disorder. And they put me on a cabinet of medication for life. And I was completely destroyed in that moment. Because of what I learned at the immersion, I realized that a lot of these things were my fault. Right? A lot of the stuff I did to myself. And I also realized that at that moment I knew sobriety in and of itself was not a path to life for me. That I had to literally change everything about the way that I moved through the world. And it like ruined me for a minute because I had this idea, like, all right, 30 days in rehab, I'll get this stuff under control and then I can maintain, I can like manage it again. I'll get back to baseline where I can still use, but it won't be a problem. And I left the doctor's office and I went back and I picked up the phone and I called my dad and I said, I'm leaving. He said, what are you talking about? What do you mean you're leaving? You're not leaving. You've been there 3 days. He said, I can't do it. I thought all I had to do was get off drugs. And I found I have diabetes, I have heart disease, I have these psychological conditions that I don't know what they're talking about. I can't do it. And he hears the fear in my voice. He hears that I'm scared. And he stopped trying to fix me. He said, Adam, let's just consider for the moment that maybe these things are occurring. I'm not saying that they are, but let's just say that they are. Well, you learned at the Engine 2 retreat that a lot of these things are reversible. You also learned how to reverse them. If there are things about your life that you don't like and you can do something about it, then that's not a problem. And if there are things about your life that you don't like and you can't do anything about it, it's not a problem, it's just the way things are. And maybe you and I can work together so that we can figure out a different way of looking at these things so it's not so overwhelming for you. And in that moment, a man that I had hated for 15 years of my life stopped being my enemy and he became my ally. And he helped me realize that if I was the cause, if I'm the problem, I get to be the solution. I'd wait for nothing or no one to start making my life better. In rehab, you don't have a lot of control over your diet, especially if you don't let them know ahead of time that you have any kind of dietary protocol that you follow. They're not going to let you change what you eat, so that's that. But they recommended that I move into a sober living facility after I left 37 days of rehab. And so this is the actual place. This is where I moved into in Santa Monica, California. And I was like, all right, great. They say that I can have healthy food. Wonderful. This is fantastic. And then I walk and I see the cabinets. Guys, seriously. Mm-hmm. It was stocked by a kid who'd been watching nothing but Nickelodeon commercials in the 1990s. That's what this place looked like. And I walked up and I'm like, there's no way if I leave here 30 days, 60 days, 90 days from now that I'll be healthier than I am today if I eat like this. And I know that they told me that they were required to provide food for me. So I decided I'm going to go talk to the house manager, whose last name was literally Hamburger. I walked up to him and said, listen, Phil, you and I, we got to have a conversation, man. I can't eat this food. What are we going to do? And Phil looked at me and said, Adam,
Why don't you tell me what you need to be successful? Because that's all I care about. And so I would get up every single day. I had my options. I'd still be pissed. I'd walk up to the cabinet. I'd open the door, and there's Fruity Pebbles. You guys, Fruity Pebbles. That was my jam. I love Fruity Pebbles. But they also got oatmeal for me. And don't get me wrong, I liked oatmeal. And here I am standing there with these two options, knowing if I choose Fruity Pebbles, it's going to continue to fuel my disease. It's going to continue to fuel the things about my life that are making me feel unworthy. I also know that if I choose oatmeal, it's going to start to create this environment for positive change for me. It's going to start to reverse these conditions. So why in the world, knowing these two things, would I still want to choose the Fruity Pebbles? Why was this not a matter of intellect and will? Why can I not know what to do, want to do it, end of story? That's it. And thankfully, someone turned me on to a book called The Pleasure Trap by Dr. Doug Lisle and Alan Goldhammer. Doug Lisle is an evolutionary psychologist, and what this book taught me is that, yeah, actually there is a biological mechanism that is compelling me to continue seeking out behaviors that create the greatest dopamine response, because dopamine is the chemical that gives us that excited euphoria that we call pleasure. But pleasure is our body's way of letting us know that we've just done something biologically beneficial. Because we evolved from an environment where every single food choice was essentially beneficial for us, it was how can we gain pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy. The modern environment, we have created behaviors and foods specifically for the purpose of pleasure without biological benefit in mind. So when I ate 2 McDonald's cheeseburgers and popped 120 milligrams of Adderall at a time, my body basically just went, whoa, whatever that was, you keep doing that, because we've never experienced a dopamine response like that throughout our entire evolution as a species. That has to be the right thing to do. And I remember all this shame was lifted from me, because I realized in that moment when I'm standing there, knowing one choice is going to make my situation worse and still wanting to do it wasn't because I was broken. It was because my body was doing exactly what it was supposed to do, given the environment I had been living in, the environment that I created for myself. I also learned that if I were to simply make the other choice long enough, eventually my dopamine receptors would reset and I'd actually look forward to it. It essentially taught me what I believe is one of the invariable truths of lifestyle change, that I simply had to get up every day and be willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable. If I could do this long enough, eventually my lifestyle would no longer be a chore. And if I could do this long enough, I would get up one day and I'd look forward to it. But I had to figure out, why would I want to do this? You've heard people talk about your why, right? And from the outside looking in, a person would say, oh, it's obvious. This guy, he's obese, he has heart disease, he has diabetes, he nearly died from substance abuse. This has to be why he wants to change his life. And those are facts. Those were occurring, but those were not my motivation. I was obese. I didn't want to be. Did have heart disease and diabetes. I didn't want heart disease and diabetes. And I did nearly kill myself from substance abuse. And I'm going to tell you guys, after surviving my suicide attempt, while I realized I didn't want this life anymore, I didn't want to die. Why not? What was it about my life that I loved enough that I was willing to be comfortable being uncomfortable in order to experience that more completely and more authentically? I had tried for so many years to hate my way out of a bad situation. It's just not the way things work. I'm calling BS on that. Nobody hates themselves out of a bad situation. People love themselves into a positive one. I was going to get up every single day and connect to what mattered most to me in my life. I told myself that I was going to stop focusing on what was the matter with me and more on what matters to me. And what matters to me was to be able to be with the people that I loved and have that be enough. To be with people and not try to take things from them, not try to get them to listen to me, give to me, but just be with them and have that be everything I would want in life. I wanted to be able to get up every single day and experience the entire breadth of human emotion and be okay with it. Look, I realized I was 37 days into recovery. It was not possible for me to craft a life where I got up and didn't feel temptations or urges or cravings or fear or anger and anxiety. It's impossible for me to craft a life without that. Those are reasonable responses to life. They mean something. But what is possible is for me to build a life where those things happen and I'm okay with it. To realize that they are as meaningful and as vital as joy, as happiness, as love. They are equally meaningful responses to life, and by avoiding those things, by fighting them, by resisting them, I might be missing out on some of what is best about being alive.
Within 3 months, my fasting blood glucose went from 390 to 80. I was taking the highest amount of oral medication, 2,000 milligrams of metformin, and I just stopped taking it without talking to my doctor. I do not recommend anybody doing that. But I went to my doctor at month 4, my endocrinologist, and we had done some blood work. And he comes in with this folder and opens it up, and he says, Adam, according to your blood work, you're no longer diabetic. And then I stood up to him and said, well, then I guess according to my blood work, I no longer need your services. I shook his hand. I walked out feeling something that I hadn't felt in a long time. Self-worth. And that self-worth made me feel like I was worth saving. It made me realize maybe the greatest knowledge I've ever gained in lifestyle recovery is that I am now, and I have always been everything I've ever needed to be, to own my life and live as my truest self. If that weren't possible, I could never change. If I wasn't complete and worthy now and at every moment in my life, I could not be the person I wanted to be. The person I wanted to be is not who I am today, it's who I've always been. Understanding that makes everything possible. I want you guys to know that we do not feel because we're broken, we feel because we are whole. It is the most human thing that any of us do. It is the one thing that I know I have in common with every single one of you here. At the end of the day, we will have all felt. It is what connects all of us. And to deny myself the ability to feel, to say that some feelings are worthy of experiencing and some are not, creates further disconnection from my truest self. There's nothing wrong with me. There never has been. Within 10 months, I lost over 100 pounds, and within a year, I was off of every single medication I was put on in rehab, including the mood stabilizers, the antidepressants, the anxiety medications, the sleeping medications, and the ADHD medications. As of today, I've lost about 190 pounds.
Wow.
And there are some people who are very much responsible for helping me return to the person that I've always been. And one of them is Rip Esselstyn. He and I have become very close friends, and I can tell you this, that when I first met him, I was in survival mode. I would do anything I could, put any toxic substance, food, or drugs into my body to escape life because I didn't want to live. Life was too much. But because of the tools that Rip gave me and helped me learn, I've been able to stop surviving my life and start living my life. And when I live my life is a beautiful thing. And I owe a lot of that to this man right here. He's become my mentor. He's a person that I turn to. He's helped me so much, and I'm actually part of the Engine 2 team. I'm a speaker for their events. My mom and my dad. I want to tell you guys the example that they set for me. They are my example for recovery, because I can think back and say, man, what a gift it must be to have someone that they love treat them so horribly, say such horrible things and do such horrible things to them, and love him unconditionally. To say, you know what, we may not like what he's doing, but we love who he is and we will never give up on him. Their willingness to say to me, Adam, we love you. Whether you're using or you're not, we love you, whatever state you're in, and if you need us, we'll be there for you. Because we don't want you to be alone or feel alone. Is the reason why I knew there was always a bridge of connection for me back to what was truly meaningful. What a gift it would be to see the world like that. What a gift it would be to treat myself like that. This photo was taken by my mom as she and my dad walked me into the doors of rehab. And this photo was taken by my mom as she watched my dad and I run the race in Austin 3 years later.
Wow.
Because they've walked this entire journey with me. They're my best friends. I get to work with my dad, which is great and not so great. But you know what the great thing is that I know that they never have to worry about getting a phone call hearing that their son has died from an overdose. The only phone calls they have to worry about are my incessant phone calls telling them how much they matter to me. My brother, come on, right? And this was Bobby in 2016. He was about 280 pounds. He had diabetes. He was incredibly depressed. And I went to him and I said, Bobby, can I give you a gift? Because I love you so much. I just want you to move in with me for 6 months. Just live my lifestyle for 6 months. Let's just see what happens. At the end of the 6 months, you want to do whatever you want. It's fine. I'll love you the same. Let's just see what happens. So on January 4th of 2016, he moved into my apartment. I was living in Santa Monica at the time. And we went to go see Dr. Matt Letterman. If anybody's seen the movie Forks Over Knives, he's the young doctor in Forks Over Knives. And we got his blood work done. He was diabetic. You already knew that. And Dr. Letterman was talking with me. He goes, tell me what you guys are doing. I told him everything we were going to be doing, what we're going to be eating, all that. And he said, well, Bobby, do you have your diabetes medication? Bobby gave him this medication. He goes, yeah, you don't need these anymore. Threw them away. In 6 weeks, Bobby's blood glucose was completely in a healthy range, unmedicated. So he was on medication, he couldn't get his blood glucose below 200. In 6 weeks, his blood glucose was 80 to 100, unmedicated.
Wow.
And within 3 months, he had lost 50 pounds, which is faster than me, that's fine, you can have that. Twin competition, that's okay. And this is great, this is a before and after photo, but this isn't Bobby. This is my brother. He's become a very signature voice in the animal rights movement. If anybody has seen the film Earthlings, anybody know the film Earthlings?
Yeah.
So my brother is a producer and cinematographer with Sean Munson, the director. They're making the next film called Saving Animals. He's also the director of the $1 Million Vegan Campaign. This chicken's name is Jackie Bob because Bobby and his friend Jack saved it from a slaughterhouse truck. He organized the animal, the fur vigil, and he speaks on the appropriation committees on the statewide fur ban for California. It is amazing to see the light that he is in this world. When I think of my brother, there's a quote, it comes from King Lear. King Lear is speaking to the blind Earl of Gloucester, and he asks the blind Earl, how do you see the world? And the blind man replies, I see it feelingly. And that's how he sees the world. For his work, saving animals, for bearing witness to their lives, being the hand of the one human touch that they feel, that is not pain, it's out of love before they die. For that work, he's a hero. For his unwillingness to give up on me, that's why he's my hero. But none of that comes close to the moment when he came up to me and said, Adam, my brother's a philosopher, he's a painter, he's a poet, he's a boxer, he's a filmmaker, he's like a true Renaissance man. He said, there's a quote from Joseph Campbell, the people are not looking so much for the meaning of life as much as they are the experience of being alive. And that's what you've given back to me. And nothing in my life has come close to the feeling of that moment. Because in that moment I realized that I'd become that authentic person I've been looking for. Because by simply being with my brother, he was able to regain everything that mattered to him in his life. By simply being with the people I love, they were able to connect to what truly matters in their lives. And I can tell you I've learned a few things. One is, as I mentioned, I am not now, nor have I ever been broken. You guys want to know why I weighed 350 pounds, had diabetes and heart disease, and nearly killed himself? Because that's exactly what's supposed to happen when you consume 5,000 to 10,000 calories of fast food on a regular basis, consume 450 milligrams of Adderall on a regular basis, and deny yourself the right to feel everything on a daily basis. My body wasn't broken. It was doing exactly what it was supposed to do. If I was a lean 150 doing that every single day, that would be weird. That would be broken. My body there's never been anything wrong with who I am. I've never been broken. Nobody is. I've always been enough. I was enough then and I'm enough now. I've only ever had 2 problems in life. I didn't know how to live as a healthy emotional or physical person, and everything else was a symptom of those 2 things. Once I accepted that the life I was living before, I was honestly doing the best I could. I didn't know any better. I didn't know any other way to live. I was finally able to say to myself, you know what? I forgive you. I forgive you for how you showed up for yourself then. You were doing the best you could. Thank you for continuing to write my story. Thank you for never giving up. Once I was able to release the need to find blame in my past story, just let it be my story, I was finally able to stop rereading the first half of my life and start writing this one. I was finally able to show up now. And now is the most important moment in everyone's life, because now is the only time when we have a choice. Change doesn't happen 5 minutes from now, and it sure doesn't happen 5 minutes before. It happens in this moment, because only in this moment am I in complete control of what I choose to do. I can choose to respond to the things that I feel with love and acceptance, or I can judge myself for them. That's my choice. I can see feelings as my enemy and I can suffer, or I can see them for what they are, a constant companion in life, leading me towards a greater understanding of myself and how I move through the world. I also have a choice to choose how I respond to the world around me. I have a choice on what I put on my plate. Every single thing that happens in this moment is my choice. That's why this moment is the only moment where change happens. And I'm so grateful for every single thing that's happened in my life. Everything, the suicide attempt, the drugs, the diseases, all of it. Because all of it has made me realize what a gift this life is. And what a gift it is to be connected to other people. To allow other people to see me completely. And to look at you and say, whether I completely agree with you or not, you're so worthy of acceptance because you're human and you're here with me now, and that's enough. To say that to other people, and whether they want to say that to me or not, I don't care. Because I want to accept everyone as they are. Because as we all are, we are enough. And the last thing is that self-love wasn't part of my journey. Guys, it was a whole freaking thing. It is everybody's journey. That's where it all starts from. Nobody removes negativity from their life. That's not how this stuff works. Do not look at this as avoiding meat, eggs, and dairy, or avoiding any of that stuff. You guys, it's all about acceptance. It's how can I accept a life that brings positivity into mine? How can I accept a life that allows me to show up as my best self in this moment and still recognize that it's okay to accept myself completely and still see that I have room to grow? Self-love is not about being perfect. It's about loving who you are as you are in this moment, regardless of whether you have room to grow or not. Now, I can tell you guys a great thing like, simplest change in your fork can make the most profound change of your life. And that's true, but the real profound change isn't in a before and after photo, guys. This is the profound change I'm talking about. It's love, it's connection. It's waking up knowing your value to the world, that you matter and you're significant just by being alive, and being connected to people who are meaningful to you, having meaningful connections to people, to purpose, to the world around you, seeing the value in them and knowing that they see the value in you. Human beings are creatures of habit, it's true, but we are more so creatures of meaning. And these people here, and there are many other people in the world that make my life meaningful. I'm one of them. I know that every single day I'm going to get up and know that I have meaning in my life, and my life is meaningful just by being alive. One of the things that's really been a real gift for me is something I'm involved with right now. It's called the Infinite Study. So I founded a nonprofit called Plant-Based for Positive Change, and I'm spearheading the very first randomized clinical controlled trial to investigate the effects of plant-based nutrition on early addiction recovery outcomes. Amazingly, this is the first randomized controlled trial to study any diet on early addiction recovery outcomes. Isn't that crazy? Like, anybody who checks into rehab today is going to be fed 3 times a day. No one can tell us what it does or does not do for them. No one. We have no data on it. And I'm really excited because not only is this a groundbreaking and first of its kind study, but I have an unbelievable team. So Jay Sutliff is the PhD research advisor, and the amazing Tara Kemp is our lead researcher. I don't know if any of you guys follow Tara Kemp on Instagram. Boy, I would if I were you. She is amazing. And Dean and Aisha Sherzai are our brain health consultants, and Dr. Frank Cusimano is our microbiome specialist. So we're doing microbiome studies. We're seeing how changes in your gut health relate to changes in your lipid, your biomarkers, and how both of those changes relate to changes in the mitigating factors that create recovery. Depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive drug use, mania, self-compassion, spiritual growth, and resiliency. We're not looking at sobriety as an outcome. We're looking about how does food and environment change and enhance the mitigating factors that create wholeness. So I'm really excited about this study. But what I really want to talk to you guys now about, I think why some of you came, is insulin resistance. So we're going to talk about what is insulin resistance, what causes it, how do you reverse it. Is anybody here, has anyone ever heard of insulin resistance? Show of hands. All right, great. Maybe someone else can come up here and do this. Show of hands, who here has or knows someone who's suffering from diabetes? This is why this talk matters. So there's 2 kinds of diabetes. There are lifestyle diabetes, which is pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and gestational diabetes. Then there are autoimmune diabetes, like type 1 diabetes and type 1.5 diabetes. There's actually something called double diabetes. We'll talk about that later, and it's not a joke. But what is insulin resistance and why does it matter? This is why it matters. Insulin resistance, think of it as the central node that fuels all of these conditions. Cancer, fatty liver, high cholesterol, obesity, atherosclerosis, hypertension, coronary artery disease, Obviously, your diabetic conditions, erectile dysfunction, retinopathy, kidney failure, dementia, Alzheimer's, all of this is fueled by insulin resistance. So first we have to define what insulin resistance is. It's pretty simple. Insulin resistance is the storage of fat in tissues that are not designed to store fat. Now that could be any tissue that's not designed to store fat, but when we're talking about diabetes, we're talking about two specific tissues. We're talking about muscle and liver. All right? So why is excess fat harmful? All right? Muscle tissue is dense with something called mitochondria. Anybody know what mitochondria is? It's your fat-burning factories. Right? That's what they are. Think of them as energy factories responsible for burning all types of fuel, fatty acids or carbohydrate, right? And over time, if you eat a high-fat diet, and by high-fat diet, I mean a diet where 40% of your calories or more are coming from fat, some of that fat is burned as energy. Some of that fat is stored in your adipose tissue. Your adipose tissue, can anybody point to their adipose tissue? Adipose tissue is actually everywhere. It's your body fat. And most people have a problem. They're like, oh, I don't want any fatty acids stored in my adipose tissue. Actually, your adipose tissue is a safety net. It prevents fatty acids from migrating into tissue that is not designed to store fat. It is the only tissue in your body designed to store fatty acids. But over the course of time, consuming a high-fat diet, your adipose tissue accumulates too much fatty acids, and some of these fatty acids make their way into different tissues. So we're going to talk about your muscle cells and your liver. And what happens is, your muscle and your liver cells don't really have any way of preventing fatty acids from migrating into them. And as more and more fatty acids accumulate in your muscle cells and your liver, they form something called lipid droplets. Essentially these little droplets of fat that form inside the muscle cells. And unfortunately what happens when you do this is that you have something called insulin receptors. And they sit on the surface of your cells. And their job is to communicate with insulin when insulin is trying to deliver to your muscles carbohydrate, glucose, for energy. That's why they're there. They're there to allow the communication to insulin so that glucose can be metabolized properly. When lipid droplets get too big, they essentially turn off communication capability between your insulin receptor and insulin. Essentially what happens is your muscle cell says, I've got too much in here, I didn't ask for it, I'm not going to allow any more energy, even glucose, into my cells to be used as energy until this problem is solved, because this is a real problem. Because this lipid droplet is too big, we know that there's too much fatty acids stored in our adipose tissue, and that is causing chronic inflammation. A lot of problems downstream happen when that happens. So your body says, until we can take care of this, no more energy can come in. So a person consumes banana, for example, or a mango, which is amazing food, high in carbohydrate, low in fat, full of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, and water and fiber. But mainly when it's broken down in a lot of things, but primarily glucose. And that glucose enters the bloodstream, and your pancreatic beta cells, they sense this glucose, and they release insulin molecules. And insulin's job is to take that glucose molecule and convey it into your muscle cells to be used as energy, or into your brain to be used as fuel for thinking. So insulin grabs this molecule, walks up to the door of your muscle cell, and knocks on it and says, hey, I've got some of your preferred fuel source. It's glucose. I know how much you like this stuff. Do you want to take it up? Because this person's you're eating a lot of carbohydrate here, and I know how good that is for you. And your muscle cell says exactly what I said earlier. Are you freaking kidding me? Do you see the size of this lipid droplet? I can't store any more energy. We're not talking until this is taken care of. So you need to stay in the blood until this situation is solved. So what happens over the course of time? This carbohydrate builds up in the blood, the glucose builds up in the blood, and then someone is diagnosed with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. Why? Because of the dietary fat consumption, not because of carbohydrate. Who here has heard that diabetes is caused by carbohydrate? Okay. It's okay. What everyone, and you know what? That's a reasonable assumption. It's a reasonable assumption. The symptom of diabetes is high blood sugar. So it's reasonable to assume that carbohydrate is the problem. But that's a misunderstanding of the biology of the disease causation. So how do we reverse insulin resistance? Well, it's pretty simple. We reduce our dietary fat intake. And we can do that by eating essentially like this. You want 70% or more of your calories coming from carbohydrate, no more than 15% of your calories coming from protein, and no more than 15% of your calories coming from fat. When you do this, no more fatty acids will be able to migrate into your muscle cells. There's not enough of them. And your muscle cells will go, oh, thank goodness. We've got some time, we can burn out these lipid droplets. Let's start getting them out. Let's go. Your muscle cells can handle some lipid droplets, but not this much. So thank goodness we're going to start burning up these lipid droplets. All of a sudden, the lipid droplet shrinks to a size to where your muscle cell says, all right, insulin receptors, start working again. We have room for energy. Go ahead. When glucose shows up, bring them on in. And what happens? This person's blood glucose level comes down over the course of time, not because they're avoiding carbohydrate, but because they're treating the underlying condition, which is the dietary fat. When you reduce your dietary fat consumption, you reduce your insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is the problem. That's the disease. And this has been in the medical literature since 1926. Dr. Sansom showed that by reducing your dietary fat intake, you can reverse insulin resistance for people using insulin. Insulin was discovered in 1921. I think it was started using on patients in 1925. And this guy, Dr. Sansom, it was essentially a death sentence then. People who were type 1 diabetic it was not a fun place to be. Their blood glucose levels were exceedingly high, they had brain fog, they had low energy. So he said, I wonder what would happen if we actually, now that we have insulin, got these people to eat a high carbohydrate diet, if it would make a difference on their ability to reduce their brain fog and increase their energy levels. And what he found was they actually didn't need more insulin when they ate more carbohydrate, they needed less. Higher intake of carbohydrate, lower intake of fat, lower intake of insulin. As their carbohydrate intake increased, their insulin needs decreased. And what's interesting is as their fat decreased, their insulin use decreased at the same rate. 1933, Dr. Hemsworth did an amazing study where he put people on 7 different diets. Each diet had a lower and lower amount of dietary fat, 80%, and the last one was 7%. And he studied how long it took for those people who were on insulin, how long did it take for their insulin to start working, and how greatly did it reduce their blood glucose levels. Those who were on the 80% diet, it took almost 7 minutes for the insulin to start working, and it dropped their blood glucose level from around 180 to about 120. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's something around there. For those who were on 7, it took 2 minutes for the insulin to start working, and it dropped their blood glucose levels from 180 to 80. This is a textbook example of insulin sensitivity. Your insulin is now more capable of doing its job. And let's face it, the great thing about being a type 1 diabetic, and I know we have one in here, is that they see the ramifications of their food choices instantly. When you eat a high-fat diet, your insulin resistance goes up, right? You need more insulin right after that, correct? When you eat a high-carbohydrate, low-fat diet, your insulin sensitivity increases. You need less insulin for that meal, correct? Doesn't that sound backwards, right? But that's because we have a misunderstanding of the biology of insulin resistance. What angers me is that people who are diagnosed with diabetes today are going to go to an endocrinologist who's going to put them on a diet that makes the condition worse. Mm-hmm. And let's face it, you eat a low-carbohydrate diet, guess what? Your blood glucose levels are going to go down. This is true. You eat a low-carbohydrate, high-protein, high-fat diet, your blood glucose levels are going to come down, and your A1C is going to come down. You may even get off medications. So you might say to me, well, why does that matter then? Well, if I'm lowering my blood glucose levels, my A1C is coming down, if I'm on less medications, what's the problem? Well, here's the problem. Because your insulin, the only reason why your blood glucose levels are coming down and your A1C is coming down is simply because you're not consuming carbohydrate. It is not because you're reversing insulin resistance. Let's be very clear about what diabetes is. Diabetes is your body's inability to properly metabolize glucose. Unless you are consuming a high carbohydrate meal and your body can demonstrate to you that it can metabolize and properly handle that carbohydrate, you cannot claim to have reversed diabetes. Mm. So these people that are doing it on a low carbohydrate diet, and most people are doing it because they just want to feel better. They honestly think they're doing the right thing, and I'm glad that they're taking their health seriously. But your insulin resistance is going up. And here's the problem. When your insulin resistance goes up, your all-cause mortality risk skyrockets. So when I say all-cause mortality, I mean death from any cause. And obviously I mean health-related causes we're talking about here. I'm not saying eating a high-fat diet is going to give you a high risk of getting hit by a car. But I mean death from any health-related cause. Your oxidative stress goes through the roof. Inflammation, cancer growth, when we talk about oxidative stress. So what are the foods that are best for reversing insulin resistance? Well, like I mentioned, I'm part of Mastering Diabetes, and we have a green, yellow, and red light food list. It makes it really super easy to follow. Green light food list. Fruits. We love fruit in Mastering Diabetes. I don't know if any of you guys follow Robbie Barbero on Instagram. He's one of our co-founders, Robbie and Cyrus. They are both type 1 diabetics. They both consume upwards of 700 grams of carbohydrate a day, and they both have an A1C of a non-diabetic. We want you to eat as much fruit as possible. Starchy vegetables are fantastic. Beans, lentils, peas, intact whole grains, leafy greens, non-starchy vegetables, any other vegetables, herbs and spices, and mushrooms. Guys, eat these ad libitum, meaning ad liberty, as much as you want. These are the foods that are going to reverse your insulin resistance. Our yellow light food list are some of the higher fat foods. Nuts and seeds like pistachios, avocados, coconut meat, olives, soy. Here's what. Soy is about 50% fat, right? So a lot of people don't know that. Pasta, alternatives, sprouted breads, dried fruit, fermented foods. These are all healthy. We're not saying these are unhealthy. What we're saying is that in an insulin-resistant state, it is best to limit your consumption of these because eating more of these makes it more difficult to keep your dietary fat intake to below 15% of your total calories, okay? These are healthy foods, but in an insulin-resistant state, be mindful of them. And then lastly, our red light food list, these are the foods we want you to avoid if possible. Red and white meat, eggs, dairy products, fish and shellfish. Avoid oils of any kind. Guys, oils are not... Oils are not your friend. I know everyone's talking about coconut oil and all this stuff and that it's good for your brain. There's not a single study proving that whatsoever. What we do know is that oil is 4,000 calories per pound of fat and saturated fat. That's what it is. All of us here completely agree that white sugar is bad for you, right? Why is white sugar bad? Because it's processed, right? It's simply a single nutrient source, processed and refined down, removing everything else that's beneficial from the food source, right? So let's say corn sugar. You've taken corn, which is full of fiber and water and antioxidants and minerals and vitamins. You've gotten rid of all of that. And you've left just behind the highest concentration of carbohydrate in a refined source. Oil is the white sugar equivalent of fat. It is taking an olive or a coconut or an avocado, all the fiber, the water, the minerals, the antioxidants, the vitamins, and getting rid of all of it. And leaving just behind the highest concentration of fat, saturated fat, and calories on the planet. It's 4,200 calories per pound. Oil's not doing you any good. If you were to grab a bottle of oil, I know there's not any here, but if you were to grab a bottle of oil, look on the back, look at the vitamins and minerals, there's a big goose egg next to every single one of them. This stuff is not helping you at all. Also, refined sweeteners. We don't like refined sweeteners. They do a lot of things, unhealthy things to your endocrine system and a lot of other things. But mostly what it does is it interferes with your body's ability to learn to like the taste of the food, right? We want you to love eating a mango. We want you to love eating dates and berries and apples and plums and sweet potatoes. Oh my God. Sweet potatoes, guys. You guys know there's over 1,100 varieties of sweet potatoes? Isn't that wonderful? We have so many more to go. Coconut products. Coconut is 91% saturated fat. Lard is 43%. Just putting it out there. And processed foods. Processed foods they're processed. Their nutritional integrity has been compromised, so we want you to avoid it. You can also join our coaching program if you'd like. This is the diabetes coaches, Dr. Cyrus Kambata and Robbie Barbero, who are the co-founders. This is Kylie Buckner, myself, and Mark Ramirez. I don't know if you guys have seen Eating You Alive. Mark Ramirez is featured in that film. We are the coaches of Mastering Diabetes, and we are here to support you 100%. You can find more about it at masteringdiabetes.org. The last thing I want to say to you guys, before I open it up to Q&A, is if you know someone who's struggling with substance abuse, if you know someone who's struggling with low self-worth or with suicide, I want you to go to these people, and I want you to say, I want to deepen my connection with you. And that I love you, whether you're using or you're not. I love you, whatever state you're in. And if you need me, I'll be there for you, because I don't want you to be alone or feel alone. What happens in that, when you say that, is this person feels seen and heard. And when people feel seen and heard, that might give them the moment when they realize and remember that they're significant. And that might be the moment that they ask you to stay with them. And for all my friends that I've lost to suicide and overdose, being in recovery is a difficult thing. I've lost 8 friends, 1 this month. I just want to say to you, I love you. I miss you, and I'm sorry that we didn't give you your moment. So if anyone has any questions, I'll take them.
Whose husband has recently developed type 2 diabetes, and he lives, the typical Texas lifestyle, plus he was born almost in Louisiana, so the barbecue and the sausage and all the things that probably are not the best choices. I don't feel like you can just go up to him and say, hey, you need to change everything about the way you eat. Right. Do you have suggestions about that?
When people are struggling, the question is, she has a friend, right? Or a family member? Friend who is type 2 diabetic. He's from Texas, he lives near Louisiana, so the culture thing is difficult. She doesn't feel like she can go up to this person and say, you need to do this, and then it'll be effective, and she's 100% right. That won't be effective. Because unfortunately, when you say that this is the right way to eat, you're also saying that what you're doing is wrong. And people feel quite judged by that. What you can say is you want to make sure that you love them no matter what, right? They need to know that as they are accepted. 2 is you say, hey, listen, I just heard this amazing presentation about how to reverse insulin resistance, which causes diabetes. Do you want me to share it with you? And if they say no, then that's fine. But at least they know you're the person to come to if they ever want to see it. And you can remind them, oh, I heard this amazing thing. You can actually completely reverse diabetes. Did you know that? I just heard this thing. I actually didn't get to hear the whole thing, which means you're not an expert, because you don't want to be an expert with your friends, okay? It's not a fun place to be. What you can say is, I didn't even get to finish it, but it was amazing. Do you want to watch it with me, or do you want to watch it? I'll give you the link, and then they can hear it, they can watch the whole thing, and then they can come back to you, be the expert. And say, oh, I watched the whole thing, guess what you didn't learn? The best thing is not to come across as the expert, or as that your way is the right way and their way is the wrong way. And there's actually a lot of evolutionary psychology in this. When you're like out with families, you go, you know what, I heard about this thing, I don't even know if they're completely right about it, but it sounds really interesting. Here's the link, do you want to watch it? It's about reversing diabetes. That's all you gotta say, right? Don't say this does reverse diabetes, because then they know that what they're doing doesn't. So just like this little hint that there's a possibility out there that they can discover on their own is enticing for people.
Could you repeat the name of the study that you're doing?
Sure. It's called the Infinite Study. And the name of the treatment center in Austin where the study is being run is called Infinite Recovery. But amazingly, Tara calling back, she goes, it's called the Infinite Study because it's investigating nutrient-dense food intervention to increase nourished treatment effects. So
That's pretty good.
we found an acronym for it. And if you guys want to know more about it, there is on GoFundMe, we have a GoFundMe campaign where if you wanted to donate $5 to the study, that would be great. Anytime we keep that trending on GoFundMe, it just keeps it more present on the front page. But yeah, we start on September 3rd.
Okay, there are simple carbohydrates, there are two kinds of carbohydrates, right? And to balance that can be tricky. For people that have a difficult time in living, like pasta and breads and things that would really give you energy, at least momentarily, to go to fruit and make all that,
Sure.
transition, it's just very hard to leave the carbohydrates. Do you have any trick there?
It's hard to leave the carbohydrates?
Yes, at least the ones that you should not eat, like the breads and the processed.
Yeah. Okay, so look, here's the thing. No one wants to change everything for the rest of their lives. That's a really overwhelming experience. It's even something you can't even conceptualize. The human brain cannot conceptualize the rest of your life. It's too big of a thing. But what you can say is, look, I heard that If you were to do this for 7 days, it would make a huge impact on your health. Why don't you and I try this experiment for 7 days and see what happens? Then there's a beginning and an end. 7 days is an experiment that anybody can conceptualize. They can see it, they can plan for it, they know when it ends. I mean, look, the first year of my recovery was nothing more than a series of 7-day experiments. I never once told myself I'm going to be sober for the rest of my life or I'm going to be plant-based for the rest of my life. I was 37 days sober at the time when I adopted a plant-based diet. I couldn't see the rest of the week, let alone the rest of my life. So one thing you can say is like, look, whole grain breads, whole grain pastas, they're not unhealthy, right? They're just not optimal. So if this person removes all the other dietary fats, the overt fats like the nuts and the seeds and the oils and stuff like that, the other processed foods, and they ate nothing but whole, intact, green light foods, and they had breads and pasta, they'd still be doing great. It's important not to make perfect the enemy of good. I put up on here on the screen an optimal way of doing it. That doesn't mean that there isn't another way of doing it, right? If every now and then you have some bread, you have some pasta, it's not going to increase your insulin resistance. But for someone who's highly insulin resistant, eating breads could cause a blood glucose spike that could become symptomatic, and that can be uncomfortable. They can get headaches, they can get tired, and so there's a reason why we put up an optimal ideal diet. But I'm not saying you have to completely avoid whole grain breads and pastas, but just understand that the optimal way of doing it is to limit those intakes.
When we consume enough carbohydrates for energy for a given day, right, and then we have more in our diet, those carbohydrates are converted to fat, right, for storage. Can you explain how that works or is different from the fat you're talking about?
Sure. Yeah, so here's the thing. It's a common misconception. The question is that when you consume high carbohydrate diets, some of that carbohydrate that isn't used is converted to fat. And that's just not true. It is nearly impossible for your body to convert whole intact carbohydrate to fat. And I'll explain why. Right? Our body does one thing really, really well, is that store fatty acids. And guess what? Every single one of these low-fat plant foods that you ate has fat. Kale is 13% fat. I wonder if you guys... Strawberries are 7% fat. Oats are 19% fat. Beans are 4% fat. Potatoes are 2% fat. There's fat in everything. So if your body has fatty acids coming in, your body is not going to blow apart a glucose ring, start rearranging these molecules into a fatty acid chain, and store those instead of the fatty acids that are coming in already. That's not the way it works. Your body stores excess carbohydrate as glycogen in your muscle cells and your liver to be used as energy later. Now it's true, refined, processed sugars can be converted to fat pretty easily, that's true, but whole intact carbohydrate cannot be. You have to be consuming an insane amount of calories for your body to convert those carbohydrates into dietary fat. That's just not the way it works. Nick?
What's your favorite kind of sweet potato?
Oh man, don't get me started. My favorite kind of sweet potato is something called an Okinawan or a Hawaiian sweet potato. Now granted, I have not tried all 1,100 of them, the sweet potatoes, but you guys can find these at Asian markets. They're white on the outside and purple on the inside. They're magic. And when you bake them and cut them open, it looks like you're cutting into a geode or into a galaxy. They're really beautiful. Japanese sweet potatoes and Hana sweet potatoes are my favorite varieties that are found readily available at any grocery store. Japanese are the red on the outside, white on the inside. Hanas are white on the outside and on the inside. Guys, once you get into sweet potatoes, those orange garnets. Really? Still? But I've had Caribbean sweet potatoes, which are called boniato sweet potatoes.
Yeah.
Someone here has had them?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Look at this.
That's the best.
You can get them in the Hong Kong market. Yeah, those are they're super starchy. Super starchy. They look like Japanese sweet potatoes, but they're much starchier than Japanese sweet potatoes, so you might have to cook them a little bit longer. But yeah, man, don't get me started on sweet potatoes. We'll be here all night.
I just,
Yeah, go ahead.
well, I'd just like to share, I was diabetic myself. 3 years ago, I was on high blood pressure, medications, cholesterol, diabetes. 3 years ago, I went high fruit, so I did 100 days of nothing but fruit smoothies. So within a month, 2 months, everything started changing. So I'm off of all medications. I'm 80 85% fruit, and then vegetables, and basically what you have here. I do stay away from a lot of this, the sweet potatoes and stuff, just because I love fruit, and so it is possible.
What you love.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, sweet potatoes are great. And everyone always asks, what's the healthiest vegetables? And here are the healthiest ones. The ones you like to eat the most. No, seriously. Because we could we could get into the minutia of what has the greatest nutrient density, and that would be kale. But you can't survive on kale. You can't. You'd have to eat over 20 pounds of it to just barely meet your caloric need. It's never going to happen. You're never going to do that. You want to find the carbohydrate-dense, calorie-dense foods that you love the most. Sweet potatoes, beans, grains, high-calorie fruits. There's so many amazing tropical fruits. Guys, have you ever had a white sapote or a mamey sapote or black? Yes? Oh my gosh, I love this crowd. What about an egg fruit? Anyone have had an egg fruit? Jackfruit? Yes. All right, these are all high-calorie fruits. You guys eat these things. Durian? Durian. Okay, I like durian, but I'm not going to ask everybody here to eat a durian, okay? And also, it's important to know that durian is a high-fat fruit, okay, like avocado. And most people can't get past the smell. But it is an amazing fruit if you want to try it. There's some amazing stuff out there. You guys get to have, it's quite an incredible exploration of flavors and textures and colors when you start to really investigate the amazing abundance of varieties that we have on this planet that are a gift to us. And to take advantage of that and to really explore what your palate is and what you like to have in your home. And whatever it is, whatever your favorite foods are, just make sure that they're in your home. There's a great quote by Dan Buettner. Has anybody here read the Blue Zones? Okay, so Blue Zones was a study done by a National Geographic fellow named Dan Buettner. And he studied the world's longest lived populations. Populations around the world that had the highest percentage of centenarians, people who lived to be 100 years older or longer, and had the longest lifespan without disability. And what he found was that there's the core four and the power nine. So the core four is one, their diet. Not one of these diets were vegan, I'm going to say that, but that's okay because a lot of these were more primitive cultures and they didn't have the access to the grocery stores that we have. They're all 90% whole food plant-based or greater. They all work with their hands and move their bodies every single day. They all have strong community ties and respect of their elders. And they all have strong spiritual beliefs. They have a connection to something greater than themselves. And I don't mean that in a denominational sense. I just mean that they recognize that there's something greater outside of themselves that they have to commit themselves to. And one of his quotes from his book, which I think is amazing, is that if you want to be successful with health, with happiness, and with food, make it easy to do the right thing. Create environments that are filled with healthy and healing options. That's what your home gets to be for you. Every single one of us has the opportunity to make our home a blue zone where the easy choice is the healthy choice. When you fill your home with foods that you love, and don't worry about the variety nonsense. If you were to look at the Okinawan diet, the longest living person on the planet today is an Okinawan woman between, the healthiest person on the planet today is an Okinawan woman between the ages of 15 and 30. And if you were to look at their diet, over 70 or nearly 80% of their dietary calories comes from sweet potatoes. 80%. What kind of variety is that? That's not variety, it's consistency. They're consistently eating the healthy choice. We all have that opportunity to do that for ourselves. And so that's one of the lessons I took from that, is that your environment, the environment that you create for yourself, is the single most impactful, most powerful thing you can do to favor your own health and happiness.
Excuse me, one thing I didn't mention was the emotional body. I've done a lot of emotional work, detoxing the emotional body. So that is really, really big because, you can change your diet, you can change your food, but if you don't change emotionally. So
a healthy choice made from an unhealthy mindset is not only unsustainable, it's unhealthy.
What is your take on intermittent fasting?
I love it. It's fantastic. It's actually one of the tools we use in mastering diabetes. So what's great about intermittent fasting, and one is, don't just start doing intermittent fasting, especially if you're on medications, without really knowing how to properly do it. There's two kinds of intermittent fasting. One, you can do a 24-hour fast, where you literally eat dinner one night and you don't eat again until dinner the next day. And then there's something called a 16-8 time-restricted fast,
where you will eat in an 8-hour window and then not eat again for 16 hours. And what this does is this allows your body to go into a mode where it actually starts to use up excess fatty acid stores. Once your body fasts for 12 hours, it switches its fuel source. It starts to use excess stored fatty acids, and this helps reverse insulin resistance. If you're on medications, you want to make sure that your 8-hour window is at the end of the day. And here's why. Because then the first part of your fast is when you're asleep. The second part of your fast, when things can become problematic, when your medications might become too much, you're awake for it. It's a safety issue. I typically do my intermittent fast where I eat at the beginning of the day, and then I don't eat again until the next morning, where I'll get up at 6 and I eat till 2, and then I don't eat again. I'm not on medication, I don't have anything to worry about, but if someone is on diabetic medication, or on blood pressure medication, and they were to fast the way that I do it, they'd eat until 2, then they wouldn't eat, and then they go to sleep during the second part of their fast when their medication that they're on may become too much and they can experience a side effect of their medication and they're not awake to correct for it. So there's some health and safety issues that you have to be aware of because the effect of intermittent fasting is really powerful. And it is it's an effective tool. It's actually one of the few things that we know as an intervention into your lifestyle that it in and of itself will increase your lifespan. So.
I typically eat throughout the same things throughout the week, but can you tell us what you personally eat?
Yeah, so there's two stories. So that's really interesting. I don't mention it anymore in my talk because I don't want my talk to be about food. I want it to be about the inner work. But when I first adopted this diet, I told myself, right, the only greens I ever ate were the occasional piece of iceberg lettuce they forgot to take off my burger at McDonald's. And I didn't really like greens at the time, but I knew what I did like. I like black beans, I like broccoli, I like fruit and oats. So that's what I ate every single day for 10 months. I ate those things. But what that did was that allowed me to know that what I was doing was going to be successful, and it allowed me to create enough of an opportunity for my body to show me what it was capable of. But now I still get up. I had oatmeal every single morning for the last 7 years. I get up every single morning and I eat about 900 calories of oatmeal it's more like cinnamon with oats on top. But I love cinnamon. It's amazing. I love Ceylon cinnamon and I love Vietnamese cinnamon. Vietnamese cinnamon is really, really hot cinnamon. It's really good, but it is hot. Like it's the one that they do in the cinnamon challenge. So don't, just be aware. Ceylon cinnamon, if you had to rate the healthiest cinnamon, Ceylon is the healthiest. And I have a side of frozen fruit. I love frozen fruit, especially in the summer. So right now I'm eating a lot of frozen mangoes. For lunch, I'll have sweet potatoes, Japanese, Hana, or Hawaiian, with a side of mushrooms. I love eating mushrooms right now. A side of cauliflower or broccoli, and more frozen fruit. And then for dinner, it's a toss-up. Like sometimes I'll just, I'll be in a rush and I'll literally just eat a big bowl of fruit. Or sometimes I'll actually make like a cauliflower lentil bowl. Sometimes I'll be out and I'll grab, have you guys ever had the Engine 2 burritos? Have you ever had these? They're amazing. So Engine 2 is a company that makes oil-free plant-based foods, started by Rip Esselstyn. They have these square-ritos, that's what they're called, they're burritos, and I'll just grab 2 from the store and microwave them there, and then I'll just go out. It's easy to do. It's like, you can just make things so simple. Like, it never has to be a concern. It doesn't have to be the best meal of my day, it just has to be a meal that I want to put into my body. Like, if I'm in a rush and I have to get out the door and there's 5 bananas, boom, there's my meal out the door. 5 bananas. It works. It's not the best meal of my life. It's an awesome meal. But guess what? I get to eat more after that. So that's typically what I eat. I don't make recipes. I'm not a good cook. If I had to make recipes, it wouldn't be a good situation. I just know the foods that I like, and I assemble them onto a plate. And the great thing about eating this way is that as long as you're putting low-fat, whole-food plants on your plate, you're eating enough calories to sustain a healthy life, which is easy to do. It's nearly impossible to get it wrong. We can overthink this stuff to death, and we can never get started. You guys ever hear of analysis paralysis? Where it's like, a lot of runners get this when they start running, like, oh, what's the best shoe? I gotta find the best shoe, and I gotta find the best heart rate monitor, and I gotta get the best tracking app. It's like, dude, you wanna be a runner? Go out and run. You don't need the best shoe, you need to run. You wanna live the healthiest life? Eat the healthiest food. You don't need to know what's the healthiest, just eat the food. And practice self-love, practice self-acceptance, practice affirmations in the morning, practice gratitude at night. Like, recognize that you guys are all enough, you're all worthy of this. This food is how you show yourself that you're worthy. This food is how you show yourself that you're enough, you're complete as you are, and you're giving yourself everything that you need to be to show up as your best self.
I want to thank you. Oh, we have one question. Go
Sure.
ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, is it possible to make a healthier, is it possible to make a healthier bread?
I mean, I'm not saying bread is unhealthy, right? I'm just saying it's not optimal, right? So, if you want to get whole grain breads that are like Dave's Killer bread is really good. And I do eat bread every now and then, right? I'm not perfect. Oh gosh, I'm the furthest thing from perfect. But like, here's the thing. Whole grains, like oats and rice, are about 400 calories a pound. Bread is 1,400 calories a pound. The water's been removed. Fiber's been compromised. The absorption rate is faster. So if weight loss is a good food, bread's just not going to be your friend. It's just not. It's like the difference between grapes and raisins, right? You've removed the water, which means you've increased the calorie density. Grapes are 200 calories a pound. Raisins are 1,300 calories per pound. I would rather eat a pound of food than eat like a handful of raisins. What's going to keep you satisfied? What's going to keep you feeling full? What's going to give you the best outcome in terms of your... Look, here's the thing. Our bodies don't count calories. That's not the way it works. Our bodies know we've eaten enough when enough weight of food has passed through our system. Okay, so we have these receptors in our stomachs that when the lining of the stomach starts to stretch, a signal is sent to the brain saying stop eating, we're done, right? That only occurs when we're filling up our stomachs. So eating raisins, you would have to eat a bunch of them before your stretch receptor goes off. You would have consumed, 2,000 calories worth of raisins. But your body wouldn't tell you to stop eating until that, and then you're going to get hungry again. The average person, there was some amazing research that was done out of Penn State by a woman named Barbara Rolls. She's an amazing researcher. And what she did was she just followed people around for a couple of days. And she didn't care what diet they were on, she just watched what they ate. What she realized is that the average person eats about 3 to 5 pounds of food per day. Doesn't matter what diet they're on. That's how much food we eat, 3 to 5 pounds of food on average. This is why portion control doesn't work. Because it doesn't matter how much you control your portions, if you're not eating that much weight of food, your body does not think you're eating enough to stay alive. That's why most portion control diets have a cheat day. So that you literally don't go crazy going, your body's not going, dude, we're gonna die. Like if you don't start eating some food, we're going to die. Literally, there's not enough coming through here. The great thing about a plant-based diet is that the foods are filling. You can eat till you're satisfied, not stuffed. You don't want to eat until the pain. It's just like for mental health reasons, don't stuff yourself. And just don't worry about it. But as far as breads, I would say Dave Killer bread, but just be mindful of why and what your goals are.
Where can you get the Epstein burritos you're talking
Engine 2 at Whole Foods.
Okay.
Yeah, they're an exclusive brand of Whole Foods Market.
Is it in the freezer section?
It is. They have that and they have ravioli, which are also really good. And they have the cereal. They have the cereal. And the burgers and the hummus and the pizza crust. Yeah. The pizza crust is refined. It's somewhat processed. I'm just saying, like, there.
A lot of vegetables on it.
Yeah, just a bunch of vegetables on top.
Do you want to close it down, Sarah?
Any other questions? I have one question.
Sure.
What is double diabetes?
Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you guys.
I don't even know about it.
Okay, yeah. So this is a real thing. So here's what happens: someone who's type 1 diabetic, who's insulin resistant, right? Sorry. Someone who's type 1 diabetic. So type 1 diabetes is caused by antibodies that attack the beta cells of the pancreas and stop the beta cells from producing insulin. They are now dependent upon exogenous insulin, which means insulin from outside the body. They have to inject insulin to give their body what it needs to properly metabolize glucose. When somebody is highly insulin resistant, if they fail a glucose tolerance test with their insulin resistance, their A1C climbs above 6.4, they're technically both type 2 and type 1 at the same time. That's type 2, that's double diabetes. It's a real thing. Most people who are type 1 diabetic are actually both. The great thing is this is not necessary. You can get your A1C below 6.4 as a type 1 diabetic if you're eating a low-fat, whole food, plant-based diet where your dietary fat is 15% or less. Robbie Barbero has been type 1 diabetic since he was 12 years old. His A1C is 5.4.
What's Ken's?
Huh?
What's Ken's?
Ken, what's your A1C?
4.5.
There you go! Look at that! 4.5. And here's the thing. I want to know, honestly, I want to know. When you go to your doctor's office, and your doctor tests your A1C, because for a type 1 diabetic, it is necessary to get your A1C tested regularly. When your A1C shows up as a non-diabetic A1C in a type 1, does your doctor ask you how it's possible?
No.
Isn't that wrong?
Dr. Carney already
So Dr. Carney is his physician.
Oh, well, there you go. Dr. Carney is his doctor, so that's why, of course.
Just real quick for me, so my A1C was up to 8.9 when I started this. So I just got off the medications, didn't go back to the doctor, nothing. I went back January this year, 5.3 is my A1C. But the doctor says, no, you need to eat all this other stuff. You have to change your diet. I'm like, but what I'm eating is working. Why? She says, I guess I can't argue with you.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that once someone has been diabetic in a chart, there's a lot of liability that goes into doctors. Like, I love doctors. I don't dislike doctors. Doctors honestly want to help people. And here's the thing, when your diagnosis goes into a chart, they are liable. Meaning that if they do not recommend medication and something happens to you, they're liable for what happens. So let's recognize that and appreciate the fact that doctors honestly want to do their best, but some of what they have to recommend is mandatory. Okay? I also recognize that a lot of doctors don't take it upon themselves to educate themselves about the benefits of nutritional intervention. Right? The fact that when I was diagnosed with diabetes, my A1C was a 12. And now my A1C is like 4.9 or something like that. The last time I was tested was like a few years ago. It was like 4.8, 4.9. And my doctor didn't even want to know how I got it reversed. He was just like, you're no longer diabetic. That was it. And, that's fine. If they don't want to know that, that's fine. I can still make it my mission to educate people. And so, yeah, let's, you guys, everything that you're eating here is great. Just keep eating this way. Make sure that when you eat those foods, you allow yourself to recognize what it is about this food and what it is about your life that is allowing you to experience more of. What is it that you love enough that you want to get up every single day and do this one more time so that you can experience more of it? That's what creates positive change. Don't focus on what it is about your life that is causing you fear, that is causing anxiety, that is trying to, the diseases, the weight, and all that stuff. Don't worry about that. Fall in love with the process of getting up every single day, eating these foods, practicing self-love, and moving your body. If you fall in love with the process, the rest of your life, the diseases, all that stuff will take care of itself. But if you don't fall in love with it, you're never going to want to stick to it. The best runners in the world don't love racing, they love running. That's why they get up and run every single day. And think about, I like to run, so I'm using running metaphors. If I'm running a race, not only can I not see the finish line when I start, I never need to see it to get there. The only thing I have to do is focus on my pace, my step, my breath, the road I can see in front of me. If I keep doing that and I fall in love with running that race, I'm going to reach any finish line I'm running towards. The same thing with life. Focus on where you are now, how you show up best for yourself now. Fall in love with the things that bring positivity into your life now and let the rest of your life take care of itself. Thank you, guys.
Thank you from the depths of my heart on behalf of the entire group. You are truly part of our tribe. We are part of yours. You are home, and I hope you feel that way, and we are so grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask anybody, and I know I'm going to call on Simon. Simon, where are you? Simon, come on up. Simon has a remarkable testimony he'd like to share with us. And then anybody else who'd like to share, you're welcome to come up also.
How much do you want me to say?
How much was
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
so beginning of May, I went for a, oh, I'm sorry, that's better. What did I go for?
You went because you had a.
No, what was the test that I took?
CT, the heart saver CT.
Yeah, so beginning of May, I took a heart saver CT, and one of my scores was a little on the high side, and all through life, I thought scoring high was good. And what happened was, my doctor immediately put me on a statin, and then he said I need to go see a cardiologist. I'd seen a cardiologist a few years before, but I knew that I didn't want to go back and see this particular cardiologist. And so we went kind of around our circle and said, okay, who do you recommend? and this one person's name came up. So made an appointment, went down to see the doctor, spent 45 minutes in the office, and he said to me, the only thing that you can do to change what's going on with you is to eat a plant-based diet. Now, side here, he also does plant-based as well.
Okay.
Would you
tell
he
us
said,
his name?
Yeah, Michael Watkins.
Mm.
And so he said, well, go home and watch that Forks Over Knives. And if you want to watch the China study, watch the China study. Tell me about it. He gave us a whole reading list, I mean, things to do. I've never been anybody to do anything in moderation. I've either been all in or I'm all out. I can't just do this or this. So I was talking to my wife on the way home and I said, okay, everything the doctor said is very logical and it makes so much sense to me, so let's do it. So May the 15th is when that started. We went home, we cleared out the refrigerator, we cleared out the pantry and everything, we donated the food. We just wanted to make somebody else sick. And then after that, I had to go and get a stress test. Well, in between times, all of this was working so well after the first 3 days. First 3 days, once you get past the third day, it gets easier. Once you get past 21 days, it's even better. And then when you get past 90 days, you're in really good shape. So I went and I aced the stress test. I've been taken off a medication already. And so far, I'm down about 40 pounds. Now that 40 pounds is just literally dropped off.
Wow.
I haven't been trying. I haven't been exercising. I mean, it's just, and I've been stuffing my face. Carbohydrates, salads at night. I have a salad bowl that I have at nighttime. I don't swear that thing weighs 2 pounds. But it's all good stuff. And I love it. So anyway, I've got a follow-up appointment. I've got to go and get some labs drawn in a couple of weeks, and I have a follow-up appointment with the doctor next month. And I'm hopeful that at that point he's going to say, you're good, you can come off the blood pressure medication.
All right.
And we're going. But the last thing that he told me was, I went for a follow-up in between times after the stress test, and he told me that I aced the stress test. The last thing that he told me when we visited in the office, he turned around and said to me as he was leaving, he said, you just made my day.
It's a cardiologist, and his name
is Michael Watkins. He was at the showing of Plant Pure Nation, the film that kicked off this group. He is a dedicated plant-based doctor, and if you need a cardiologist or you know somebody who needs one, he's the guy.
You guys ever heard that joke? The non-vegan says to the vegan, my cardiologist says I need to eat meat. The vegan says, I don't have a cardiologist.
For those of you who don't know, San Antonio is having its very, very first Veg Fest.
Yep.
Since it's the first one, we have no precedent and we don't know what it's going to be about. However, we will have one table, which is me and a bunch of our cohorts there, sitting there to emphasize the benefits of a whole food plant-based diet. The rest, we don't know. It's mainly animal rights people and so forth, and some of the people there are not necessarily whole foods plant-based. But to get more information, there is a flyer. There's a flyer out there on the table. There aren't that many, so if you can, please conserve paper and take a picture of it. I think it's Eventbrite, and it may be $5 admission.
My brother and I are speaking there.
Hey, Ken?
Thank you, Ken. Thank you.
Ken, if you have a Facebook invite or anything, let me know and I'll share it so I can let our group know online.
For the event?
For the event, yeah, if you know of any that's out there. I could look it up too, but yeah, just pass it on if you know
So
of
Ken will
one.
share the event on the ATX Alive Facebook page.
If we can,
How about
if
that?
there is one. Yeah, if there is one, I'll look around too.
Sure. Oh, Rebecca's gonna go first. You'll be next.
Hi, my name is Rebecca, and I was going to share the last time I was here, and I chickened out. But 2 years ago in June, I've been diabetic for almost 30 years.
Wow.
And on insulin for 15 years I was. And I had watched Forks Over Knives, but my husband was low carb, we have to be low carb. So I watched Forks Over Knives and What the Health. And so I sat my husband and my 11-year-old down and made them watch What the Health with me. And that finally clicked. And they said, okay, we'll try this with you. Now, I had also been studying intermittent fasting and periodic fasting, so I decided personally to start my journey with a 7-day water-only fast. Now, never do that without a doctor's approval. Just before that, I was taking 2 pills and 280 units of insulin a day. I was taking so much that I had to take what's called RU500. It's a high concentrate, so I didn't have to inject myself 4 times. 280 units a day. I did the 7-day fast, no exercise, just relaxing, making sure I was checking my sugars. I discontinued all of my blood sugar medication 24 hours before, and never went below 80. It started, 80 to 120. And after the 7 days, when I started eating Forks Over Knives and ramped up my my medications, my insulin normalized at 140 units. I dropped my insulin by 50% in 1 week.
Wow.
So I followed the plant-based lifestyle for the next 3 months, and then the week before Halloween, because chocolate is the bane of my existence, I did my second 7-day fast. And I was at 140 to 150 plus the 2 meds. And when I ramped back up after the week, it was 80 units a day. So again, 1 week of allowing my body to cleanse and retreat was enough to drop my insulin resistance by 50%. And I did my 3rd fast after New Year's and went from 80 units to 0.
Wow.
So I'm still taking a couple of pills, although one of them, half the time I have to cut it in half or not do it at all. But during that time, all my numbers went down, my cholesterol went way down, and I dropped 50 pounds in the first 6 months.
Wow.
Without even trying.
Wow.
After that, it's the non-compliant times that kept me from kind of losing more, but I've lost another 10, so I'm down 60 from that. And but even at the beginning of my journey, people would look at me and say, your skin is just glowing. I looked better, I felt better, I had a lot more energy, and people could really see it in the way I ate and the way I interacted with people. So it really does change your life. I can walk without my legs rubbing together. Yes.
Yeah, and I want to say congratulations on your success.
Thank you. I'll show before pictures if anybody wants.
Oh, I'd love
Say, if you are healthy and on no medications, you are only recommended to fast no more than 3 days without medical supervision. If you are on medications, and I'm glad you had the success that you did, it can be dangerous to fast without medical supervision.
That's true.
So, glad you had your success, but everybody's different.
Yes.
And it can be dangerous. So, all right, thank you. Congratulations.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you. Okay, hi, my name is Morgan. I already shared to the Facebook group. I think there's a private one and a non, but
Yeah.
I am hosting a workshop on September 28th at Soma Vida about how yoga and plant-based living really go hand in hand. So we are going, it is like a movement class. I tend to teach all levels regardless, but how movement can encourage the benefits we get from a plant-based lifestyle. So I'll go into some foods that are beneficial for certain things, like certain organs, and how the movement can enhance those benefits. And yeah, there will be snacks after. There's these Mexican treats that I found this woman, she makes gluten-free vegan Mexican candies. So it's on the Facebook page, and maybe if there's another way to share it, I'll put that out there. It's on Eventbrite, so tickets are $25 if you get them ahead of time, and then there'll be a little bit more at the door. So
Great, thank you,
thank
Morgan.
All right, folks, again, we meet the third Sunday of next month. We are a community, as Adam talked about, that is so important as part of this lifestyle. And I want to thank all of you for being here. Have a wonderful month. Enjoy those beautiful foods that Adam talked about. And see you next month.
Nick, do you have
Oh, Nick, sorry. Stuck up.
Hi, I'm Nick Painter, and Adam mentioned blue zones in your home. I am looking for a roommate, ideally oil-free vegan.
Oh, wow.
So you can reach out to me on Facebook, Nick Painter. Thank you.
Great.